world right now. So, Charlie, thanks for coming today, man.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate it. How's everyone doing? We'll stand if you don't mind. So this is gonna be conversational. We're gonna talk about a lot, but I really need your input today. So please don't just sit there quietly the whole time. So I'm very happy to be back. AI is a term we all are familiar with now. It's a buzzword, and we could talk about all different angles of artificial intelligence. But today, we live in a very specific period of time. We live in a period where AI is just getting started. We're just on the forefront of this. They're not our overlords yet. There's not these giant AI takeovers that have really transformed our ways of life, but we're living in this pragmatic period of time where there's some really interesting, practical, everyday applications of AI. So today's presentation, we'll talk a little bit about what AI is, why it's used, how it works, but really, we're gonna really just go through a few cool examples of pragmatic tools that are being used today for artificial intelligence that anyone in this room could use. We're gonna talk about the pros, the cons, discuss a little bit, and just kind of get a feel for the snapshot of where we are right now in this point in time. A little background about me. I am the founder of Render Analytics. Before that, I got my master's at the University of Florida, right up the road here, in business intelligence and analytics. I spent a few years living in DC and New York, doing the big corporate thing, learning a lot there before eventually starting Render Analytics. And we work with all different kinds of companies, not just about artificial intelligence, but about all different types of data-related use cases. We've got clients as small as one-person shops and as big as Marriott hotels, Blue Cross Blue Shield, big companies like that. So we really do see the gamut with what we do here. So before we can get into these examples, what is AI? No wrong answers. So you guys got to start here. You look like you're about to say something.
Artificial intelligence.
Go on.
So it's just pretty much like, a collection of different inputs that I've created. Like, for example, ChatGPT, they've scanned the internet, and started to use it as like a search base where you can input answer or questions and feedback and answer.
Absolutely. ChatGPT is the biggest example today. How many of you write your papers with ChatGPT? Smart. I was testing you. Just kidding. But so it's the biggest one today. Does anyone know how it works? Generally, you don't have to explain the very specifics, but high level, how something like ChatGPT is powered?
It's like a predictive text. It's like when you are texting on your phone and it guesses what the next word you want to say is, and it just searches the internet or uses the internet as its training base to predict what the next word it should put on a topic.
Absolutely. So I think the key here is how it's powered, right? And it's powered with just a ton of data. ChatGPT goes through the internet, scours it, and just gets billions and trillions of rows of data, collects it in these massive warehouses, and then does what we call machine learning models, basically just predictive modeling that self-corrects over time on these massive data sets. And that's what we see today when we use a ChatGPT. And there's other use cases, right? Chatbots are definitely the most practically applied one today, but we see it in video-related instances, AI photos, things like that. With that in mind, let's hop into our first example here of pragmatic AI, because I know we're mentioning ChatGPT. I don't like ChatGPT that much for some reasons. I use ChatGPT all the time, but it's got a core problem here. It makes us lazy, right? We can now rely on it to write our thoughts for us, and then maybe we just edit those thoughts on top, but it's really taking away our critical thinking a little bit. The first example I want to talk about is Grammarly. So you might be familiar with Grammarly as a brand. For those of you who are cut off here, I'm sorry. You might be familiar with Grammarly as a brand, but you didn't know that Grammarly recently introduced some pretty high-tech AI. And what I like about Grammarly compared to, say, a ChatGPT is Grammarly is not writing for you. You're still learning, you're still writing yourself, you're still allowing yourself the critical thinking ability of actually putting your own thoughts on paper. But then instead of just writing it for you, uses AI to improve your writing. So it's more of a supplementary tool to actually make your writing more advanced, as opposed to just doing your writing for you and kind of dumbing you down a little bit, I hate to say. So with that in mind, I'm kind of curious, do any of you use tools for your own writing skills right now? Maybe not for school, but just generally? Are any of you guys using ChatGPT for your own writing, your own problem solving, anything like that? What use case do you use it for?
I use it kind of like Grammarly. I just paste in my paper and have it give suggestions.
That's a great use case for ChatGPT, and I like that. I don't mind when people do that because that's still your writing ultimately. I will say ChatGPT has a tendency to kind of rewrite your own words though a little bit more than I'd say Grammarly does. Are there any other tools in this space that you guys use?
I use it to like dumb down a concept.
To what?
To like dumb down a concept.
So if you have like a really complicated concept and you're saying, explain this to me more clearly.
Yes.
So use it more for like almost like a tutoring service.
Yeah.
Nice. Would you ever, so let me ask you this, if you didn't have that, would you actually hire a tutor? Or is this the kind of thing where it's like, it's great, but it's not actually substituting anything for me?
I would go to a tutor, but I think like in a quick instant, more so like history, if I need like a timeline, like put in a good way to read it, then I would just use that instead of going to a tutor.
So let's kind of transition this conversation a little bit here to maybe the downside of a tool like that then.
Okay.
So are you saying then, maybe you would use a tutor, but now the use cases for having to use a tutor are slim to not, maybe it has to be a really specific use case now, 80% of your, do you think tutors have do you think there's a professional worry? Some people might lose their jobs to do this kind of thing?
Maybe.
I see you shaking your head, I'd be curious to know your opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just with a lot of different things, like, my mom works for a pharmaceutical company, and almost everything, like the pharmacists that work there are kind of void now. They're there just because they have the degree, because everything is done through AI. So she works at like a Walmart facility. So there, instead of like having all kind of different pharmacies and techs going in and actually like reading through the scripts and all that, they run it all through these different programs. So all they need is like one pharmacist in the building just to have that paper there. So.
Does anyone, that's a really interesting point, and like, so they'll have one person as opposed to 5, so they're not necessarily totally,
Exactly.
but now it's 4 fewer people employed. Does anyone have the opposite opinion on this though, that they're not too concerned about that kind of thing? I see someone in the back.
So I actually am a pharmacy tech and I'm going to pharmacy school, and there's AI that they think is good, but their personality of like having a pharmacist to talk to about your medications is something that AI just can't do, because they're like, hey, this makes me feel like this makes me feel like that when I take it, and so I've seen that people don't want to talk to a robot about their emotions.
Yet.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. No, you're right. That's a great point. There's a personalization component to this. Some things that AI will just never replace, right? I mean, you'll never replace the human connection, hopefully. And so something like maybe a pharmacy tech, there will always be some role, but it'll be interesting to see how the scope is reduced and transformed over the next like 3 to 5 years. Anyone have any other thoughts on Grammarly specifically as a tool that they maybe want to throw their 2 cents out? Could you see yourself using a tool like this for your own day-to-day?
Yeah, I tend to use it a lot because, first of all, I'm Vietnamese, so growing up, my English wasn't that well, so Grammarly helped me with my punctuations and to lay out my sentences way better for my essays. So.
You know what? We have employees who are all over we have some employees in Philippines, Pakistan, India, and when they're writing, we ask all of them to use Grammarly because they can speak well enough and they can write their basic concepts down, but this just kind of cleans up their thoughts in a way that all the barriers to, you know, that maybe someone in the past would just kind of shake their head at, it's just gone now. They would never even experience that. So that's a great use case for someone who maybe it's not their first language and they just kind of need help around the edges. This next example is near and dear to my heart because this is our baby here at Render Analytics. This product is called Apply Genie. We recently won the biggest tech competition here in Orlando, the Orlando Business Journal tech competition. Apply Genie is AI for job applications. So gone are the days where you have to sit back and write 30-minute long job applications and then send each one out only to have each one rejected by some bot that because you didn't have the right keyword at the bottom of your resume. So the way that Apply Genie works is it'll connect to your LinkedIn or your Indeed profile, assuming you have one of them. You'll connect your resume, and the tool will be able to read your profile, read your resume, and be able to dynamically answer questions on job applications using AI in real time. So basically, it's not just spam questions and answers, but it'll actually say, if the question on a job application is, how many years of experience do you have with project management? It'll look at your resume, It'll say, oh, you have 2 years of experience in product management, answer the question, move on to the next one. It even allows for custom dynamic filtering. So if you were to say, let's try this one. So if you were to say, I only want jobs that are remote, or I only want jobs in Orlando, or I only want jobs that have this job title, or at least $60,000 in salary, you can put that in there and it'll search for only jobs under those requirements and only apply to jobs that you want to apply for. Send out hundreds at a time, sit back, get interviews lined up. So this is our own tool here. So let's open this one up for topic a little bit. Now, Grammarly, maybe it was a little more like, hey, it's just helping write on my, off the edges of my writing. Do you see, what are your feelings on generally using technology for the job application process? Is this just sort of like the chore that's just being automated? It's no big deal, I'm just trying to find the right job and it has nothing to do with my skill set? Or is this something that kind of takes away the personalization of the job matching experience?
I feel like it's just making the task easier. Because a lot of times, like you were saying prior, that even companies will use systems to just look for keywords and resumes. So it kind of takes away that personalization as well. If you can just get the words that they're looking for or it's a part of your resume, makes the task easier for you.
So you basically, hey, it's just business. Just trying to get my job done. Anyone feel, here, you open?
I feel like a big aspect of job searching is resonating with the company you're applying to, like their mission as well as the environment of the workplace and stuff like that. I feel like this tool kind of overshadows that and just says all you care about is salary and hours. Here's what you're applying to.
You're absolutely right? Like this is definitely a personalization component, right? You're just blasting here. You got it in here.
I think it can also help because there are certain people out there who are looking for very specific things out of a job and are like only looking at like 1 or 2 separate like aspects, like, oh, is it close to where I am? Is it X amount? Is the salary X amount? I feel like it can help just kind of put all those jobs that fit those criteria in just one place rather than place like when I go on LinkedIn and I'm looking for that, like those specific criteria, I always see all these jobs. It's like, no, don't want that, I don't feel like working for that company. And it's just a good way to put all the stuff that you're looking for just in one place.
That is a good point. So let me ask you to kind of respond to his point here, which is, what about the component of like, I actually want to be hired by a company I care about, or I align with their mission, this and that. Maybe I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
My kind of thought on that is basically just like, if you want to look for rather by company rather than by like any other certain criteria, then by all means you can still do that. I mean, it's if you feel like you have a better shot at going directly to this company rather than applying to via like AI like Apply Genie, if you want to go through a connection or through the career fair, if you feel like you can resonate with that company, then this is just another avenue to do something.
So you see it as like, look, it's a tool in the toolbox, use it or don't.
Yeah.
If you have, I think I generally agree with that, which is, if you have a specific company in mind, you should go for it. You shouldn't use AI for it. But if you're just trying to get yourself out there, get started, there's different use cases. Anyone else have any thoughts they want to add? You have another one?
Yeah, to pick up what he was saying, I feel like you can get accepted to a job, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it. It's just an offer. You can do further research after you have the qualifications to get the job, to see what the company culture is like, what benefits they offer. So
It's true. The tool only automates the first round, right? Either it'll get you to the first round interview or it can't get you past that. It also gives away 25 for free if anyone's inclined to give it a whirl themselves. And it also excludes actual employers. So let's say you're working at some place right now and you don't want to accidentally apply there. It'll make sure you don't apply there. Let's kind of turn on this a little bit. So do you see this as a problem in terms of as an employer, right? I mean, as you mentioned, employers are already using tech like this. If I'm an employer, I probably don't want to know that someone used a bot to get to the first round. But do I really care if they have the right skills? And it's just, at the end of the day, they're qualified for this position, they're just not filling out job applications all day? Does anyone have a thought on that from the employer perspective?
I feel like if you're an employer and you ask like a behavioral question and you wanna know how they would handle a certain situation, if you use like an AI tool, they might give the employer the answer that they wanna hear, but it may not be, how that specific, candidate would handle the situation.
That's a great point, and it's actually a good, interesting situation within the tool. So sometimes a job application question will come up that the tool's not prepared to answer. Maybe it's because it's not on the resume. An example of that might be something along the lines of, tell me about a time you had a struggle with a colleague and how you resolved it. That's not gonna be on your resume or LinkedIn profile, right? Right now, in that case, the tool simply won't apply to that job, and it'll put it on the side for you and say you can apply this on your own if you want. But it's sort of the interesting dilemma that we have internally. You know, how do we handle that kind of weird one-off case? Do we ever want to try to answer that, or is that just the kind of thing like we're not going there on that type of job application? Anyone else? Yeah.
The worry I would have as an employer is to go through the job application process shows that you really care and shows that you're willing to put in that time even though you're not getting paid or you don't have a job secured. So I'd be worried, does that person really want to be here, or are they just applying to a million jobs?
It's a great point. It's a great point. And it's actually what employers tell me the most is like, this is not good for me. I think that right now, this is where we are with the technology. Our own mission is to eventually, I say our own goal, it's not our mission. Our goal is to eventually create a tool that is sort of a two-sided interface where the employer and the employee both go, link together, and it'll be like a match-based thing. You're 93% match for this role, 91% match. That's probably where it will go in the next 3 to 5 years. And I think that will probably address some of that. But I'm really glad you brought up that point.
I also think it depends too on like the company. Like I work for a government contractor, so like our knockout questions are, do you have security clearance? Are you a U.S. citizen? Like those things are really easy to just for AI to like look through, because our main thing is to look at a resume, and that's 3 seconds. You have what our requirements are, and then we move on. So it's also really, really quick too.
Absolutely, and most applications are like that. Most of them are just filtering so that either someone from the HR department is going to call you or they're not, right? And our next integration that we're thinking about doing is Workday, which is all like that, all very structured questions. Those are our favorites, nice and easy. But I guess the way the employer would avoid this type of technology is like you were hinting at, very personalized questions that no AI bot will ever accurately respond to, or will have to lie, I guess. Any other questions or thoughts on Apply Genie before we move on to our next example here?
Does Apply Genie, do the employers know that they use Apply Genie?
No, it looks like they applied through LinkedIn or Indeed.
So then how would they know that it was like automated?
They wouldn't.
So then there's no issue.
Well, there's no issue. You might ask yourself if there's no issue technically. Is there an issue, if the employer ever found out? I mean, technically the employer would never find out, but, there might be a moral qualm here.
Okay.
And if an employer is really trying to avoid this, they would, again, just answer they would ask more complicated questions.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just, it's a move, counter move thing on the part of like employers and potential employees. Employers implement AI to search for keywords and filter out the people that don't fit what they're looking for. And so a tool has been supplied for potential employees to then put those keywords in. It doesn't mean that they're like, I don't think that means that the potential employee is doing anything wrong. It just means that the employers got a little more sophisticated in how they were filtering people out. The potential employees caught up to that level of sophistication, and now it's time for another move if they want to filter further, like having more sophisticated questions.
I just got an article published in Analytics Magazine that covers your exact point here. It's an arms race, basically. So yes, I totally agree with you. I know the gentleman in the back had a point that I'll call on you next.
Do you get data for the job retention rate using something like this? Like, are the people that are applying happy with their jobs and staying with their jobs over a long period of time?
Our tool is relatively recent. It's less than a year on the market, so we don't have job retention data at this point. We only have data around placement and interview rates. But that is something that we are looking to study in the long run. It's actually an interesting challenge that we have to actually do that kind of study. We have to follow up with these people. It's something that we want to build on in the future, but right now we're not supporting that kind of analysis after the fact. But I mean, that's super important, right? Are they satisfied? Is it just another job? Are they just job hopping every 6 months, or is there intrinsic value in this? That's a really good point. I know you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna like kind of go off of what you said, which is that, well, like, I understand like a lot of employers have like certain keywords that are like filtered throughout, like digitally, right? Like when you look at the resume. Would this kind of like hinder you though from like being able to tailor like certain like keywords that you feel like they might look at, you know, like in each job application? Cause like for me, like when I've applied to roles, I'm like, when I read it, like the description, I'm like, this is like a very specific buzzword that's in here. I feel like they're trying to like look for that, you know?
So the tool uses machine learning to respond to questions, right? So it often will look at the question and try to answer the question within the answer. So if there's a question that has a specific keyword in it, it might come back around into the answer in a way that, you know, let's say, tell us about a time you had experience with Python as a coding tool. It'll start off, I used Python when, you know, so it'll trigger that response, right? So it will use the job application's own keywords as sort of like a mechanism. But if they were looking for keywords that were not on their own application, you're right that it may not trigger their skills per se, but presumably you're doing a search that's aligned with your own skill set because you're connecting your own profile and everything. So inherently, I hope if you're a dentist, you're not applying for accounting jobs, right? But no, you're right. There's definitely like potential there for mismatching if you're not careful. I know you had one too.
Are you guys like using a learning model for another AI or something? You guys develop it?
We have, so it's fun, that's a good question. So we have, it's like our logic for anyone who has any coding experience here, it's like an if statement. So the first layer is our own machine learning model that we've created in-house. If our model can't answer it, the second layer is let's ask ChatGPT. And we have like a prompt thing in place for ChatGPT. If ChatGPT, and we have an API and all that. If ChatGPT can't answer it, then we skip the application, save it for the user, and recommend it to them as to apply on their own.
And is that kind of becoming a standard practice with these? Because I know Apple's just recently started it, and that seems to be exactly what they're doing with it.
You can't beat them. Look, they're just so powerful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, we're a small company at the end of the day compared to them, and we're trying to keep up with our own models, but at the end of the day, ChatGPT is more powerful.
Does OpenAI just leagues ahead of everybody else?
There's 3 or 4 in the space. Anthropic, which owns Claude, is a big one. They're neck and neck on that chat functionality, but OpenAI really has figured out like getting API, like making accessible for other applications. And Google's investing in their own AI. If you've noticed recently in your Google searches the last few weeks, you'll notice that the AI response will be coming more and more. We're Google partners, so they tell us in advance it's going to be coming. They're going to be really trying to use their own AI, and the Google responses coming up. Bing has got an AI, they're okay. Those are the big 4, I think, right now.
So now, also, did you develop your model in-house, or do you like hire somebody to do it? Like, are they like contracted outside?
There are people.
They are your own?
Yeah.
I see.
We have a team, right? So
Right.
yeah. I wasn't individually coding every line of this, but our collective team. Yeah.
People open.
Yeah. Cool. Let's move on. I know we got 2 more examples here, so I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. This one starts with a quick video here. So let's get into it.
你好，你能告诉我去市中心怎么走吗？
You tell me how to get to the city center?
Yes, of course. You can take the tram. It stops here and will take you directly to the city center.
是的，当然，你可以坐电车，它停在这里，将带你直接到市中心。
So I translate. Translates to, I want to say 80+ languages, real-time audio translation. You can speak into it and immediately shoot out another language of your choice. Great for communication, AI powered. iTranslate is not even the most powerful one on the market. There's actually one called DeepL, if anyone's inclined to look it up. That's so powerful in terms of its accuracy of translation that it's even used in academic and research settings where you have to be incredibly precise with your language. So it's really becoming a real-time translation tool that you can use to communicate. I'd be kind of curious to hear how you guys think you could use a tool like iTranslate. Traveling is the low-hanging fruit. What else?
I guess meeting with international people on business accords. So.
Absolutely, communicating, for any business reason.
I haven't, when I worked at my last job, there were so many different languages and not everybody speaks the same language. So when you're in that situation and you're the only person that speaks English and everybody else speaks a different language, it's very hard to translate. And I noticed myself going to like Google Translate. This is a few years ago, before everything was there that I could, but I had that tool and it translated wrong, because there's so many different variations. So I had a hard time. So something like this would be a lot easier to use in a situation like that to help efficiently get your job done. Because especially when you're having to tell people what to do or train people and they have no idea what you're saying.
Especially in real time, like to type it out. I think one of the really big transformations of AI in this space has been the transformation from tech. We've talked about 2 text examples here, but this is an audio example of AI, right? AI is speaking like a human being. I mean, we all know Siri and everything, but this is AI real-time response powering behind it. And I think it'll be really interesting when we live in a world where the ChatGPTs of the world will primarily have audio as the main source of communication, where you talk to your ChatGPT instead of typing to it. That's not too far away either, right? Do you see any downsides of a tool like this? Maybe, yeah, go ahead.
Probably mostly, like I know with Google Translate, a lot of like grammatical errors. Like you type something into Google Translate, like it spits out another language, but you translate that back into English.
It's not clean.
It's never perfect.
So miscommunication and also sometimes tone of voice and stuff don't fully get translated through.
I think also with different languages, there's jargon and slang that doesn't get translated. Like I know in Chinese for tram, there's not a, we would just say a bus. So it might pick something out, like say, go translate into a train or something, and that doesn't really, might make sense for someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Slang. Well, hopefully the AI is going to get better and better on that front, though. It's going to get so accurate that even like dialects, slang, things like that will read between the lines and be able to translate. What about just does anyone think think that it's actually going to deter people from learning new languages? Maybe beyond just school requirements, but hey, I was going to learn Italian because I was going to do study abroad in Italy, but now I could just use iTranslate to get around.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think like it's sort of what we're talking about in the first part, where like to use Grammarly to supplement rather than replace. Like learning a new language is an opportunity to expand your skill set. And if you're traveling, if you're planning a trip to Italy or to Egypt or whatever, before you would have maybe bought Arabic to English or English to Arabic dictionary or Italian to English, whatever, or use a tool like Duolingo. But if you don't have to, I think most people are going to choose the convenient route, which is let me just have my phone speak for me, rather than choosing to expand their skill base. And I think like that will be in the future. That's going to be really, really evident. There's going to be this divide between the people that use it for convenience, for the like easiest path, and the people that choose to use it to supplement, but also expand their skill base, use it as an intermediary sort of.
It's an interesting point. Like we're all gonna eventually be relying too heavily on AI or learn to live on it with balance. It's a really good point. I see some response to that.
If anything, I think it also might do the opposite. Like obviously if you're traveling, like you might just use it for convenience, like I went out of the country for a week, like whatever. But like you said, if it's a business scenario where you're using it like day to day, like eventually you're probably gonna pick up on the language and it might even assist you. So
That's a really good point. Anyone else have a thought they want to add?
I was gonna say that I would think that the pros outweigh the cons for like the quickness of it. But also I couldn't see myself like learning Italian for a 2-week trip. So I think that I'm just being real. But I like he said, that it also might help you learn, if anything, something rather than going there not knowing. You could still be wrong too if you're learning Italian for a month before you go.
That's true. That's true. Let me, all right, so you want one more response?
I'm just,
Oh, no, you go first and then he'll go.
I was just gonna say, this might have been said at this part, but I feel like eventually we get to a point where processing power is so quick that like, it's barely translating, it's just like communicating. You know what I mean? Where you just say something and they just interpret it through their AI, or it just communicates it to their earpiece or whatever, they hear it in their language. We don't even bother learning the language, because we're just communicating, we're all connected.
I think there's a sci-fi show or something that has that kind of concept in it. That's a really good point.
So I was gonna piggyback on that. Do you feel like maybe that's kind of like the next step for like an app like this? Because I feel like using this, it can seem a little unnatural where you would have to speak to your phone and, you know, the other person looks at the message and it translates over. Maybe there's a point where you have something like an earpiece or something that translates live for each person. It's just a more natural way of like communicating.
That's really interesting. Now you'd have to carry around an earpiece,
Or
but
something.
we all got the AirPods anyway. So.
that was actually a huge selling point for the Google Buds, like years ago, there was a live translate feature.
Oh, wow.
That was a little rocky initially implemented. I don't know where they're at on it now, but people are working on that. The other thing that I was gonna say, like, I agree with what you were saying over there. I think, so the world has shrunk in the last like 100 years, especially. As soon as like air travel became super accessible to anyone, like you can get pretty much anywhere in the world and you don't have to be a bazillionaire to do so. And so the world shrunk there, and so now that we can get anywhere, it's like, okay, how do we limit our barriers to entry, and which are like in today's age, like it's a mental barrier. Like what is keeping me from going somewhere else? And the mental barrier might be, I just don't know the language that they speak in Qatar, in anywhere. But I'd be interested in going there. And so having something like this could shrink your world even smaller because you have fewer reasons not to go, because communication barrier just isn't there anymore.
That's a really good point. Let me ask one more question on this. I kind of hinted at this on the first question, the first example as well. Translators are pretty, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are translators as a job. Are they, you originally said, I think the group's feeling on the first example, which was Grammarly, tutoring is gonna still exist. Do you think translation is the kind of thing that you need the human connection for as like a translator, or do you think this job is gonna be, the job of a translator is toast?
I feel like when it comes to translators and interpreters, I feel like a lot of I guess professional occupations like upper level businessmen, politicians would still use interpreters for like whenever a politician goes on like a like state visit or there's an international business deal happening. I feel like having an interpreter as opposed to using AI would just make everything smoother.
Okay, that's a pretty unique use case though. Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think there's like in a lot of languages, there's so many like nuances, even in like tones and gestures, and even like certain like phrases that sometimes like I don't think even AI can necessarily pick up on that. Like one example I could give is like I speak Japanese, and Japanese like the word that technically means like good could be used as like a, oh, I'm good, yes, or also no. It's like 3 different meanings just on like the tone that you say, and I feel like that's something you would only pick up on if you like have it translated. And also, yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, go continue. When you finish
I was
yourself.
just gonna say also, I have a friend who's a translator for baseball team in Japan. She works with international people. She's Japanese. But she helps with so much more than just necessarily like translating. Like she also helps them like with their kind of like going to the doctor's office and like certain like stupid things like that. Then like it would be I think way harder to do without an actual person using it.
She's almost like acting, and a handler's might be the wrong word, but she's like helping them facilitate their day-to-day interactions, not just translating. Yeah, it makes total sense. I think you had a point you wanted to add.
Yeah, obviously can't do the day-to-day stuff yet until we get like robots. But on the topic of it can't learn things, I just feel like there's nothing AI cannot learn given time. It will learn everything. Nothing is immune to AI's knowledge, if it has enough time to learn the data.
Yeah.
I feel like the only save for translators is they save you time, but if the AI gets faster, then I don't think there's a need for translators.
There's no doubt that these things are just getting started. Like they're talking about ChatGPT 5 like it's gonna blow our minds. So it's only gonna be a matter of time before every one of these tools is just a little more sophisticated than they are today. You have a point in the back.
So I'm translating. I think my mom, she has translators with her job, and she always is complaining to me about like as far back as like 10 years. I think remember, she's like, oh, they say the wrong thing, the people are getting the wrong message, they're like changing it up a little bit, like she's just like talking about the human error of translating. So to be honest, I think my mom would rather have something that's saying exactly what she's saying because she's always been complaining.
So you think it's gonna actually be better at translating the nuance? Interesting. I think so too. Eventually, I don't think we're there today, but I think that we're not too far from that. Maybe even months, if not years. Anyone else have thoughts on this one? You wanna throw out? Either of you? Trevor.
I was just gonna say that eventually, once it obviously gets better, I think I would assume it's just way cheaper and also way more convenient. So I think eventually I can see this AI just taking over everything.
Have you ever seen Her?
That's the one where he like falls in love with his AI. Is that it? I think I've seen previews. I don't think I've watched the whole thing.
I feel like to a certain extent, especially after like chatting with ChatGPT with the sound on and stuff, while it's in a really like raw format, that to an extent, eventually like AI will be able to simulate like a human connection, genuine, by just interacting like a person.
Oh yeah, they've already done that. I mean, you could go online right now and play with ChatGPT and get shocked with the way that it can respond to you if you give it the right prompts.
I don't know, you see Bumble released AI that learns you, and then your AI dates other AI
that's
to
pretty
figure out who you like.
That's
Oof.
really
I think there's a Black Mirror episode on that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's a Black Mirror
Yeah.
episode on that. That's wild. That's like the Apply Genie, but now to dating, huh? That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, cool. We got one more example. So let's one more video here. This one's Kaya Health. Sorry, I couldn't think about you guys.
We use your mobile device and our motion analysis technology to guide you through each exercise. Kaya delivers physical therapy grade instruction and feedback from the comfort of your home, making sure your sessions within Kaya are safe and effective. We'll keep you motivated with some helpful nudges and feedback along the way. Plus, our technology generates digital biomarkers that can help you track your progress and even have a little fun along the way. Motion Coach by Kaya Health.
So this one is now health, right? Now we're talking about a tool that basically does two main things with AI. The first thing it does is it uses video to correct your own form in real time. And the second thing it does is it creates personalized plans for you based on your goals and your body. And it's able to track your biometrics. So it's basically personalized plans for you, personalized correction for you. Could you see yourself using a tool like this? Anyone?
I think in terms of like physical therapy, I definitely can't see myself in the future where I'm gonna get old using something like that, because it's not like a natural, like I don't want an AI to diagnose me because of the models, but I'd rather have be more like a guide into what I'm doing, so it's not totally I would say I would still have some autonomy to it.
So for you, it's not like a replacement to a personal trainer or something like that. It's more of like an at-home supplementary tool.
Yeah.
Anyone feel differently? Or I'll let you give your point regardless.
Yeah, I think I heard something about saying like we will help you correct your form and maintain. I feel like a lot of fitness people don't really get the full benefit of a fitness workout because they don't really have the proper form for it. So I think something like that. And from a different light, if you're having like an online course and you want to have that as a part of it to help with the actual workout itself would be something that's beneficial.
Good point. Anyone want to refute that or argue again? All right, you raise your hand, I'll let you.
Yeah, I'll say that I feel like this type of app is like perfect for the type of people that are, old and never been to the gym before, or new and they're like nervous to go, because one of the barriers to going to gyms, you don't know how to do the exercises, so this will show you how to do them, it'll show you how you're doing it wrong, and it makes you more comfortable to then go into the gym, because you can practice at home, or maybe use it at the gym, get the weights and stuff.
Okay, interesting. So maybe it's not replacing the trainer. Is it replacing the YouTube video you maybe using at home right now? Where you're using like someone else guiding you and you're kind of watching, but it's not they're not watching you.
Yeah, like it'll generate your workouts for you too, so you don't have to go to the gym and be like, oh, I'm gonna have to figure out to do this and this and this, because some people only be doing like the same 7 workouts every time they go to the gym, but keep it fresh for them.
Good point. Any downsides?
I mean, how does something like this, when if you were to apply it to like weightlifting and trying to get proper form down and things like that, or maybe something like this, like if the AI kind of hallucinates or has some sort of error, like hurt themselves, like who's liable?
What happens if AI makes a mistake? It's kind of like the self-driving car dilemma, right?
It's kind of on you for you utilizing AI properly.
Also, I feel like for certain exercises, you can't really just immediately do like a bench press. Like you look at the ceiling, your phone's gonna be on like a desk or something. So.
Yeah, you're right. This particular tool right now is focusing on mostly PT, I believe. They do mostly like calisthenics kind of stuff. But you're right. But what if it did eventually? Like, let's say the camera wasn't the problem.
Alright. I mean, I would say again, like he said, the liability if it airs out and suddenly you have a barbell on your chest.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was gonna say maybe with that, I guess that what was a vital report it would be generating, probably kind of doubting the accuracy of that a little bit, because you're not sitting in and being analyzed by instruments. It's basically it's all guesswork by what a camera is seeing, and it's running it all through it, although it's most likely like an extensive bank of formulas and algorithms. It's still most likely not going to be as accurate as you be like sitting in like a doctor's office or like a nutritionist's office and actually being analyzed by instruments.
Yes. The funny thing is, all those instruments you're describing will be transformed with AI as well in their own way. But it maybe isn't convenient to have like all these pieces of equipment at home, even with AI.
I think the big barrier to something like this is going to be the public trust of it, learning to trust it. There was a study done by the Oregon Research Institute in like the 60s, where they had a bunch of people with cancer, and they got they x-rayed the cancer, and then they had a bunch of, for 50 people with cancer, 50 people without, had x-rays of clean, no cancer, with cancer. They duplicated those, so they had 200 pictures, and then gave them to a bunch of doctors to diagnose, and sometimes the doctors themselves were diagnosing one person that had cancer in one picture as having cancer, and then the same picture as not having cancer, because they're looking for different things. But then they took that information, the researchers took that information, gave it, or asked them, okay, what are you looking for in diagnosing this cancer? And then trained a model on that, fed it through, it spit out the parameters that they were looking for. And the model itself, based on the parameters that each doctor was looking for, was then able to way more accurately diagnose whether or not a person had cancer or not from just an x-ray. So you would expect a doctor that's been trained to be reliable every single time, but that's not necessarily the case. That's why they say go get a second opinion. The AI is just compiling all of the different opinions, the second, third, fourth opinion, into one model, and hopefully outputting fewer false negatives than a single doctor would be able to output themselves.
I have a buddy who, he doesn't work there anymore, but he was a AI startup for a while where that was, their goal was to implement AI with x-rays and just basically be a supplementary tool, not a substitute to a doctor's diagnosis, but enhancing the accuracy.
Just relating to this, I feel like AI might have a harder time replacing in this industry just because even in fitness or even PT, I feel like the human connection is really a bigger deal. Like if someone got in a car accident, like having someone there motivating you versus like an AI saying motivating words, like very different. So yeah.
I'm hearing a theme across all the topics that we talked about, I'll get you in a second, which is the field that is at most, the fields that are most at risk are the ones where the personal touch doesn't matter as much. The fields that have the most safety are the ones where the human connection still matters, at least to some extent. It's interesting how that kind of seems to be a theme here. I know you had a point right here.
So, I'm just curious on where like the technology of this will grow. And, like on the topic of like trust, let's say that we eventually do start trusting it more, and maybe it makes its way from our home onto this app where it records us and gets all this data into like maybe the gym with the equipment that we use with sensors and just cameras. Maybe even with a personal trainer as well, where we can collect all this data for ourselves. Do you see this as something that grows where we can like use it as a tool where a personal trainer, even maybe even our doctors have like all this information about us and they can kind of just like grow in that direction?
That's the optimistic future, right? We're all, and it's just a source of making all of our lives easier. And like, I hope that's the case, right? And yeah, I mean, we call it the Internet of Things, right? When we have all the equipment around us is integrated with a cloud or some sort of data collection mechanism. You know, our smart ACs that learn our temperature habits, things like that. The same thing could be applied to medicine or to fitness. And like, I hope that the future of these tools will be a world where there's still a role for the personal trainer, there's still a role for the translator, and it's just making their lives 80% easier. And you know, they can use that time more effectively for other things. You know, only time will tell. It's an interesting question. I know that a lot of the people who are really leaders in this field, they do have somewhat pessimistic views that it's going to be more of just we rely on it way too heavily. But I think that's probably more of a 10 to 20 year problem than like a 3 to 5 year problem. We're still the generation, even you guys, we're still old enough that we'll remember pre-AI world. Think about our kids and our grandkids who that's all they'll ever know, you know, is using tools like this. So it'll be interesting to see how dependent they become on it. Any other points anyone want to bring up? Got you in the back.
So I was just wondering, so in a program like this, if there's a breach on that, that's hundreds of thousands of users' data, which is vulnerable, where if it's an individual person, then they only have their clientele. Is that's something specific? It's more of a risk that if this gets breached than an individual.
Cybersecurity is its own topic on this, and it's going to be huge, right? We already have big data breaches, like once every couple months, a big company has some data breach. There's going to be hacking AI tools. All their job is to hack, right? There's going to be tools that all they try to do is hack other people using AI and hack other companies using AI. So yeah, I could see data breach, data privacy concerns being massive over the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be, I don't even have a solution per se. I think it's going to be worse before it gets better.
Do you think with something specifically like this, because it's working with personal, I assume it's not, it's HIPAA?
You know, I'm not sure about this particular tool's affiliation with HIPAA. It may not, because it's more like a workout tool than a medical diagnosis tool. I bet each tool, I'm sure each tool will have its own level of privacy. But again, if you've got AI tools out there that are really dedicated to hacking it, it's gonna be a constant back and forth, right? The goal will just be not to be the lowest hanging fruit. That all the AI tools say this is the easy win here. Yeah, I think there's gonna be some problems. There's gonna be some problems. It's gonna probably affect all of us in one way or another. We can only hope that it's gonna be minimal. Any other questions? We'll open up for more questions here anyway. So I want to throw my contact information up here on the board. If you ever want to give us a follow on Instagram or just throw me an email, you're welcome to do so. Happy to answer any personal questions you might have, maybe about your own careers or about any topic that you didn't want to bring up today. Feel free to give Apply Genie a try. Like I said, it's free to try. And I want to use the remaining of our time here just to open up for any other questions you guys have. We got 10 minutes left.
Yeah, so for me, I'm interested in investment banking, and I understand that when it comes to financial data, there's a whole lot of numbers and stuff being inputted in real time, whether that's in intraday data or like financial statement data. I understand that AI is being used right now to, or at least being tested to basically just gather information, put it into a warehouse, and then input it into a model. I understand that it's important to kind of sanity check that, but where do you see analytics regarding such data going for the future?
So I think the question you're asking me is like, how is like, can you maybe rephrase the question? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
sorry. Like with its ability to take and input financial data, like
Right.
where do you see that ability going into the future in regards to
Financial data,
investment
right.
banking?
Very accurate predictive modeling about what's going to happen in the stock market. Actually, a few years ago, Google claimed that they could predict this, like a lot of stock market features, and they actually had some moral dilemma about whether or not they should even use this model because it was so accurate. It's going to be very accurate, but also there's going to be an effect here where, because it's so accurate, because it's so highly predictable, that actually the ability to predict actually impact the outcome, right? Because, like, for example, if AI predicts a winner, does it actually change all the way we behave to the point where it actually changes the outcome, or a loser for that matter? So it will be higher predictive power, but it'll be interesting to see how that impacts human behavior and if that throws a wrench in it or not. And if it can self-correct based on humans' reaction to its own predictions. Beyond that, it's also going to be used really, this is more boring, but in a regulatory setting. So it's going to be used to make sure that banks and financial institutions. My first job out of school was PwC, working for data analytics for the banks as the client. Right after it was a few years after the financial crash of 2008, and my job was to go in there and make sure they're following all the rules using data analytics. And I could see a lot of that being automated. It's not as exciting, but regulatory stuff will be a really common use case. What other questions you guys got?
Do you feel like there's a moral obligation to slow down the rate that AI consolidates jobs? Like, do you think that we should intentionally slow it down so that these people in time can be positioned, or just exit the workforce entirely? Or do you feel like it's just like capitalism? Like, if it works, it works.
What do I think is going to happen versus what I think should happen? So what I think should happen is that there should be some sort of regulatory slowdown. Right. And I'm not, there's many ways you can handle the transition, but it's good. There's going to be a transition of where AI is. And I think in the long run, just like any other technological transformation, roles will transform. But like if you've been doing a job for 40 years and they say, AI took your job, learn something, that message doesn't resonate, So there's gonna be a rocky transition period.
Do you think there's any chance that we do regulate it and slow it down?
There's already like I should say that those are decisions that are gonna be made at the government level and at the level of leadership at the highest. I got you after at the highest level, but I have heard conversations about like Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Microsoft, a few of these other companies getting together and talking about like a shared regulatory policy. I've even heard that we're in talks with China on this topic as well, which is a big part of this because we don't want to slow down if China's not going to slow down. Right. That's so it's actually becoming a geopolitical conversation. Do we trust our politicians enough? I'll leave that for you to decide. All right, what else? No other questions? Career, AI generally? I think I see one.
Is it legal for AI to be trained on your data? Like, if I work for you and I work for you for 10 years and the whole time you're building a model based off my work and then you fire me to use that model, is that legal?
Yes, I mean it depends on your agreement, right? Like it depends on if you're just an employee, just like if you're building anything else, it's not AI, right? If you're an employee and you work for some sort of software development company and you create some really good software, like a really cool website, but you're not an owner, you're just an employee, and you get terminated, it stings. Hopefully that your employer has respect for you and won't screw you over, but it's technically the ownership of the company as it stands today, just like any other intellectual property. There'll be an interesting question over the next few years about, who, especially as AI gets super powerful, should be treated like a utility in some capacity, should be owned by the general public, should just like in Alaska where they all get a check for the oil money, should everyone get a check for the AI money? So it'll be interesting to see how we treat AI as an ownership concept in the future, but today it's like any other IP.
So I know you have a background in business intelligence, and I currently intern within the department for just data and reporting analytics. And I'm just curious in regards to AI, like what can I do to like start out to bring some type of value for that in terms of just AI?
What kind of business you say they were?
They're new for like resorts and just like attractions.
The most common use case for people to enter into AI as a business, not as an individual, like these are examples as an individual, would be marketing and sales related AI, right? How do I get a higher conversion rate? How do I get a higher percentage of people on my website to book? How do I get a higher percentage of people to call? How do I get a larger audience? It's all about optimizing your top of funnel and just getting more money. That's the most common for businesses today, at least that I've seen. Secondarily, I'm seeing operational efficiency changes, right? You know, optimizing your schedule, optimizing, hey, this staffer actually doesn't need to work during this time, that kind of thing. Especially in the hospitality industry, it's so service-based. How do I get as few hours of labor as possible for the optimum outcome? That's already how data analytics treats that industry. It's just that AI is going to make it all faster and more seamless. When we talk about business analytics, we're usually talking about how do we make more money for less work. Really, that's what it all comes down to, right? That was actually our talk last year when I came in, was all those use cases.
So my situation's kind of flipped, and I actually got my job because of AI, because my boss is really overwhelmed by it, but she knows that like it needs to be utilized. So do you think that that's like also an option to open up job opportunities?
Oh yeah, I mean, AI-related jobs are going to be on the rise, especially for young people, helping old people who are like aren't going to figure it out themselves. I've got a couple of clients who I swear they don't know how to check their emails, you know, and AI is definitely going to be something that they're just like, I don't even want to deal with it. I think that in 30 years, all of us will be so integrated that it's going to be less of a, like, I'm going to be your AI handler. I think it's going to be more, how do we just all it's almost impossible to predict, but AI is going to be incorporated in all of our jobs, right? Whatever we do, AI is going to be a big part of it. It'll be interesting to see each industry how the human element remains. All right. Oh, we got one more here.
Silly question, but like, how many years until like we'll see a like very big impact or like you know?
I mean, what do you define as a very big impact? I would argue that ChatGPT is really revolutionized a lot of businesses, and we just haven't fully realized it yet. If you're asking like, our society changes as we know it kind of thing?
No, well, maybe not that percent, but I see what you're saying.
It's going to be incremental. It's not going to creep. It's going to be a creep up. One day we're all using ChatGPT. The next day we're all talking to our ChatGPT. The next day, I think that some of the big phases that are going to shock people are when it's really, really sophisticated at audio, video, and imaging. It's already basically there, but to the point where it is indistinguishable from human behavior. And then the big transition after that will be robotics. And you can just imagine. Yeah, all the sci-fi movies. Cool, I think no one else has got their hand raised. All right, guys, I really, really appreciate your time today. Like I said, you know where to contact me. Thank you.